asked the question.
So what's the total? Is it 30? Is it 38 or 30? It's somewhere in there.
Yeah, so it's 28 for wastewater.
No.
You must wait.
I mean, it's not like
We
I
only
didn't
have
have
a
last
few
night.
minutes. Laying it out.
Right there.
It's funny because that one's off compared to my watch. My watch is 36:01.
I'd like to call the regular Planning Commission of May 9th to order at 6 p.m. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Commissioner Burney, are you there? Commissioner Stafford?
Present.
Commissioner Crafton?
Here.
Commissioner Sajo?
Yeah.
Commissioner Seals?
Present. Commissioner Stafford, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Does the commission have any adjustments to tonight's meeting agenda? If the commission would like to discuss anything under the consent agenda, such as the minutes, they need to be pulled out and put under new business at this time. Hearing no changes to the agenda will stand. We have a report from the Deputy Administrator.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to bring everybody up to date on the business side of the city. We have 2654 for business licenses to date. Some of that increase has been the success of the events at the Menard Center, as we have really stepped up a compliance component of making sure they have business license when they're out there. Our economic development plan, we had our last steering committee, and we will be coming out with a report here for you guys to look at in the next 30 days. We have 60,000 square foot of new construction in the pipeline compared to 43,000 square feet in total in 2022, so that is a good sign, although residential is down quite a bit. Our hazardous mitigation plan, which is required to be updated every 5 years, that will be kicked off tomorrow. And I attached a appropriations update so you could see all the different communities around the state that made the first cut for the appropriation out of the Senate back in DC. So we had 28 million for our wastewater treatment, water extension, and 2.8 million for stormwater management. That was one of the biggest hurdles you have to get through back there, but we still have not finished the race. We are 50% done with the airport master plan. That will be completed here probably October. The MPO, Matthew Burrow was here last night to talk about the MPO. I did attach a map of that area, and you will notice that the map includes Wasilla, Kinnick, Fairview, North Lakes urban area designation. So the calculation and the map that they put together is something we're gonna have to live with. But I thought it was important that you guys have that in your back pocket when people start asking you about, especially in real estate, when you're talking about rural development loans and things like that. They're asking for our support or some letter of support because they need to form it by August, September. MS4 is the other piece of compliance that's coming down the pipeline from EPA, and that's going to require us to monitor all of our stormwater, map all of our utilities, and really, I guess, smart scale our utilities for a pretty hefty price. So we're working on some of these appropriations to set that in place. We do have 5.6 million for additional water and wastewater. That was 2022. The EPA has been slow to push that out, but we should be putting that in our capital improvement bank here in the next 60 days. We did confirm that Matsuburo is doing the final contract for this, what they call the Interconnect Water Project. That is simply meeting the city of Wasilla's Palmer water system by the hospital there on Higher Road, and we'll do a quick connect to ensure that we can pull pressure off each other's systems if we have another storm that would cause our water to not be functionable for the city. We talked to FEMA this week about the donut hole out at the airport. That's one section of Clap Road that doesn't have any power, and we did a grant to FEMA in October for pulling power through the donut hole under the creek and to the airport. They're still considering it, so they'll have an answer maybe in June. Repairing the Spruce and East Susitna water towers, those are in play, as well as purchasing a piece of property up by Sun Mountain that will be housing another water tower. That legislation passed last night, so we're happy owners of a piece of property there, right? A good piece of property for a new water tower. And then our flow analysis and our geotech is continuing up at Zone 4. We ordered additional pumps, so we are not left with pressure issues anymore. And then, of course, this digital mapping. So as far as policy, not too much out of Juneau other than something that Tina will talk about that's relevant. Our legislators have told us to head east unless you want to pay for schools, give a dividend, or I guess spend time in Juneau. So we're pivoting east. We're giving airport tours to quite a few companies. We had the DOT Commissioner Ryan Anderson out here today. We took him out to the airport, showed him Main Street. We have the Alaska Railroad coming out next week to talk to us about the depot project and how we can expedite those visitors off of a platform that's relatively safer than dropping them off at Main Street in the gravel pit. So that's where we are for economic development. If you have any questions, I will be here after. And Tina, you want to talk to him about Juneau?
Commissioner City Attorney, do you have a report? City Attorney? City Planner?
For the record, Tina Crawford, City Planner. Not a lot to report. Give you an update on what currently is on your June agenda. The council referred a street name request to change Cruzy Street to Warrior Street, so that'll be on your agenda. The code requires that the Planning Commission conduct a hearing, allow people to provide comments, so that'll be on your agenda. The other item that's currently scheduled is an airport lease lot. They're looking to build a 10,000 square foot building. So it's not a permit that you would normally review. It's not a conditional use. It's not an elevator permit or anything like that. The city code states that if a lot is leased and they're constructing a building 10,000 square feet or larger, then they have to come to the Planning Commission and then go to the City Council. So their building is exactly 10,000 square feet, so they will be in front of you to discuss their proposal. And then you'll make a recommendation to the council as to whether you believe that's a good idea or not. So Public Works will be there to present that to you. You have two handouts from planning. One of them is the one that Ms. Nygaard referenced, which is the House Bill 184, just to kind of give you information as to what's happening at your state legislative level. It's a bill that's proposed to limit short-term rentals in the state of Alaska, and it indicates, it's aimed at addressing the growing housing crisis. We talked about that different times too. That's why the city adopted a short-term rental code several years ago and capped it at 75 so that we were trying to get in front of that and not have it impact our housing market, but yet still allow some commercial opportunities. So anyway, we'll keep you posted if that continues forward. The only thing that I did see in his proposal is he was limiting the properties that an owner could have to one. Currently, our code allows 3. So if they did pass it, we would have to amend ours, but obviously it's in its infancy, so we'll have to wait and see how that goes. The other thing that you have is in response to the request at the last meeting, you have the code language and regarding the parks vendor permits, and it has their regulations. So that was something that was requested, so you have that as a handout. And that's all that I have.
Thank you. Public participation part of the meeting. Anyone wishing to just step forward to discuss anything not on the agenda tonight can do so now.
I understand that not on the agenda. If it's on this paper, does that mean it's not on the agenda? Or what?
If it's committee of the whole, they can speak now. If it's a public hearing, you can't speak now. So if you're speaking about the dog kennels, you can speak now.
Okay.
And you can speak again at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Please write your name and contact information on the sign-up sheet and state your name for the record.
Okay. Hi, my name is Barbara Mack. I live in the city of Wasilla. I wanted to talk about the dog kennels because I saw it on the other back page of this budget paper, meeting paper. And I just wanted to say that nobody really wants to live near a dog kennel because they are noisy and the dogs bark a lot. If one dog hears a noise and barks, the other ones follow, usually. I mean, if there's 30 dogs, they're gonna be barking, and then they keep barking because they hear the other one barking. And then the other thing is, I think a lot of times, dog kennels will have dogs that they breed or they board the dogs and stuff like that, so that's more dogs in the area that would be barking. So I'm just thinking that in the city limits, it would not be good to have all the dogs barking, and might make the property values go down because of the kennel next door. Nobody's going to want to buy property or move in right next door to a dog kennel, I think. And then the other thing is there's lots of other places right outside the city that aren't in residential areas or the city center that would be good for dog kennels, and a lot commercial business like a dog kennel would be. So that's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Moving on to the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Stafford, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Commissioner Sage, so move.
Are there any objections? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved as presented. Minutes of April 11th meeting. We're going to move into new business. Mrs. Crawford, would you please introduce item number 1 and provide your staff report?
Certainly, for the record, Tina Crawford, City Planner. Item number 1 is conditional use permit number 23-02 with the associated resolution number 23-06. The applicant is 907 Architecture LLC. Matthew Wilson is here. The owner is GKS Properties number 2 LLC. The request is approval of an extension to a previously approved conditional use permit, number 16-01, to construct a new 15,590 square foot building on Lot 5 and a new 12,500 square foot building on Lot 6. Lot 5 is approximately 1.03 acres and Lot 6 is approximately 0.99 acres. They're addressed at 2024 East Boundary Way. The properties are zoned commercial and have a generally commercial and business future land use. In your packet on page 7 is the staff report. It addresses all of the general approval criteria that the commission's required to consider and adopt findings that the application is consistent with those criteria. Staff has provided findings in the staff report and also carried them over to the resolution. It's staff's opinion that it does meet all of the criteria, and therefore the recommendation is approval with a few conditions. If you turn to page 13 of the staff report, I'll just briefly go over the conditions. The first one is at the request of the applicant. At the time when they got the previous approval, they constructed one of the 3 buildings. There were originally 3 lots, 3 buildings. They constructed one of them. It was on lot 4. Due to circumstances that the applicant can explain, they did not move forward with the other 2, so the conditional use expired. So this time, to allow them to do a phased development, they're asking for the approval period to be extended to 5 years from the date of the approval instead of the standard 1 year that's in the code, and the commission does have the authority to do that. The second one, it just states that the fire marshal has to review the building plans for consistency with fire safety. Number 3 is a standard one that you have to be consistent with the plans that are submitted, and any substantial changes have to be reviewed by the planning commission as a new application. Number 4 just references that there is an approved land clearing approval. This is the original permit or conditional use permit was approved under the old landscape code. Land clearing waivers do not expire. They're like a variance, so they go with the land. So the applicant is keeping that same landscaping approval that he has. So you won't see the standards that are in today's code, but that's an approval that he has that he's carrying forward. And so it just notes that he has to install the landscaping consistent with that. Number 5 is that they have to coordinate with Public Works to connect water and sewer. Number 6, they're requesting to have a temporary 40 by 40 building on lot 6, but that it will be removed within 1 year of the completion of the building on lot 5. So that's for them to store materials in while they're working on the site. As a city planner, I can approve up to 6 months, but because they're asking for a longer period of time, it's incorporated into their request. Number 7 was a note from Public Works that there's a fence along Foundry Way that needs to be checked for encroachment in the right-of-way and relocated or removed if it is. And then number 8 is the standard the applicant must submit an as-built survey after the completion of each building. You do have a handout regarding this particular case. It's revised comments from Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities. Initially, they had objected to the driveway shown on the site plan. However, the plat that they looked at was not the most current plat. That plat had been removed and there was a note allowing that particular driveway. So that's no longer an issue. So that's what that handout is the updated comments from DOT. With that, that's all that I have. You can see the site plan on page 17 in your package and the resolution that's for the Planning Commission to consider, which again incorporates the findings in the staff report that's on page 47. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Would the applicant like to make a presentation regarding the proposed request?
I guess.
My name is Jeff Hatt. I am the owner of GKS Properties Number 2. And as Tina spoke, as we've put this program together in 2017, we built Building 1. The building that I'm working on to start on currently, the foundation was put in 2017. We had every intent to construct it in 2020, but we all know what 2020 brought to us. And so that was the reasoning that I was trying to get the 5-year extension versus just the 3-year, because we don't know what the economics are gonna be if I can make it work or pencil out to do the second or the third building in a 3-year time frame. As we saw, as we just don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow. So we've been fully, we're occupied in building 1, complete right now. And with the consensus of the real estate companies around town, there is a use, but you don't get the use until the building's up. You know, people are looking, but you know, you can't get anybody kicking tires till they can see what they're kicking. So I'm hoping this evening that we can get this approval passed and we can get under construction and put another nice building up in Wasilla. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Public comments portion of the public hearing is now open for conditional use permit 23-02. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? You have 5 minutes to provide your comments. No one wishing to speak. The public comment portion of the public hearing is closed. Does the applicant have anything else to address?
No.
Now I need a motion to either approve or deny conditional use permit 2302, resolution serial number 23-06.
Mr. Chair, if I could interrupt here just for a minute. If any of the commissioners have a question for the applicant, they need to ask them before you have a motion, because once you close that portion of the public hearing, then you won't be able to ask the applicant any questions. So I think it's an ideal time to see if the commission has any questions specific to the applicant. Otherwise, you can move forward with the motion.
Any commissioners have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Sajel?
No.
No questions? Okay, now I need a motion to either approve or deny conditional use permit 23-02, resolution serial number 23-06.
Commissioner Stafford, I move that we approve conditional use permit 2302, resolution 2306.
Do I have a second?
Commissioner Crafton seconds.
Is there any further discussion by the commission?
I did have a question for the city planner on this one.
Now's the time.
Yeah, Ms. Crawford, I know this seems to be, gosh, I know you gave it to us in a different spot here. I'm trying to remember. The zoning for this section was commercial specifically?
Correct.
Okay. And it looks like, I mean, I'm okay with them doing this one way or another. I was just more so a curiosity's sake here. Is there a reason why we weren't encouraging sidewalks in this area here? I looked around and I mean, it doesn't look like there's any sidewalks on that side of the highway in general, and we do have some nice shops down the street as well, and some small businesses here. I would think that we'd always want to encourage sidewalks starting to be installed when we have new developments like this, to start creating that interconnectivity of it not just being a driving city, but also a walking city. So do we have any idea why that wasn't requested at the time?
Yes, so if you go on page 11, it's criteria number 16. That's the response. So from the planning standpoint, when we're looking at an area, what the code says is that it's to provide circulation or access to schools, playgrounds, shopping area, or other facilities. Where this particular property is located, there aren't those kind of facilities. So the practice has been, and obviously it can change, the commission can change the direction if they want, but when there's no need for that connectivity and it's an auto-oriented use based on its location, and there's no sidewalk within a reasonable distance, we don't put that burden on the applicant to go do that. At such time in the future that there's determined that a sidewalk would be appropriate, if some of the character of that area changes, then they would be put in place. So an example would be Steen Commons, and the development just to the north of them. They have a requirement to connect the sidewalk from Palmer Wasilla up, because you do have, as you go up Robert Street and go down the hill to Susitna, there's residential down there. You could technically walk from, there's also a path along the Palmer Wasilla. So they were required to do it. But when you're in situations like that, the past practice has not been to put that burden on them.
And so part of it's the vicinity of another sidewalk as well, is what it
Yes.
sounds like. So
Part of it,
again,
yes.
there are shops just down the street. I mean, they're not very far. I mean, but because they don't have a sidewalk, they wouldn't be required to install the sidewalk. Is essentially part of the reasoning behind that.
That's been the current practice. Like I said, I do understand what you're saying, and ideally you would want to piece it, but when the area is already predominantly developed and there are no sidewalks, creating a sidewalk to nowhere hasn't been the.
Yeah, and again, I wouldn't want them to have to put one in to basically have this random sidewalk sitting nowhere. There's none after it, none before it. Just more so a curiosity's sake as to when we start encouraging that. So it sounds like if if the city wanted that, or we wanted to direct that to us to move in that direction, essentially it'd be on the city to install the sidewalks at some point, then to
If you don't require the developer.
correct. Okay.
Now, the shops at Sun Mountain did have to do sidewalks.
Yeah, and I'm saying that's what I'm saying. It's on the other side of the
Yes,
highway. There's
right.
nothing on this side of the
Yes,
highway
right.
for that one. So that is all my questions. That's just a curiosity question at that point. Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor of approving resolution serial number 23-06, please say aye. Any opposed, please say nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion passes. Ms. Crawford, would you please introduce item number 2 and provide your staff report, please?
Certainly. Again, for the record, Tina Crawford. The next item on your agenda is resolution serial number 23-07. It's a resolution of the Wasilla Planning Commission recommending that the City Council amend subsection L, mobile food vendor, in section 16.16.060, specific approval criteria, to revise the application requirements, standards, and criteria for consistent application, clarity, and ease of use. So in your package, beginning on page 63, you have the strike-through and underline version. It goes through to page, 70. Then beginning on page 71 through 77, you have what I call, just for ease of use, the clean version, as if all the changes were accepted. There aren't a lot of changes. We talked about them during the committee of the whole. So I didn't create a table to outline them, but I thought we could just briefly go through them. I'd walk you through the changes, and then if the commission had any other suggested revisions, certainly add them. So the first one's on page 64, it's line 41. Just for clarification, it says that one-day events on private residential property, you don't need it, these are exemptions. So what we've seen over the past couple years is we have had some businesses that want to have an employee recognition event. They want to bring in food trucks, but it's not open to the public. So it's just saying that they can do it too, because right now the code doesn't allow them to do it. So that's, like I said, to have that equitable treatment. On page 65, lines 58 through 62, this removes the requirement for a mobile food vendor to submit a site plan for each of the locations they're going to. It'll make them easier, they can be more nimble, move from location to location. What we did was adjust, as you'll see in here, we put the burden on them to understand what the standards are and to make sure they comply with them. So instead of them submitting it to us, to the planning department to be reviewed for compliance, it'll now be incumbent upon them to be aware of it and to make sure that they operate within the regulations. The next one is just titling it like the other ones. On page 66, on lines 74 and 75. It's removing the requirement for notarized acknowledgement. We still want them to have to do an acknowledgement, but it's done through the online permit application versus them having to find a notary and upload that. 77 and 78, just removing the other information. It hasn't been used in the past, so, and based on some of the feedback from the city attorney, if you don't specifically call out what it is you'd be looking for, have an example, just don't have it in there. So we're striking that out of there. Line 80 is where it states, 79 changes it to the standards instead of approval criteria. Again, it's no longer going to be reviewed by staff. These are the standards that they must follow. And so line 80 states that all movable food vendors must comply with the following. So there wasn't really a lot of change to those rules. There was some reorganization and moving just to make sense of them. And then let's see. We did add on line 83, just a reminder that compliance is a continuing requirement by the mobile food vendor. You know, you're on notice, you are responsible for compliance. 88 and 89 is just adding that reference to the district use chart because there are zoning districts that they are not allowed, so it's income, you know, it advises them that they have to be within a certain zoning district. We did add language on line 91 through 94. This is so they don't need the site plan, but what it states now is that the placement of the vehicle in the food service area can obstruct traffic or create congestion issues on the adjoining rights-of-way and has to be oriented to protect the pedestrians. So again, creating the standard instead of staff just reviewing it. The code already said the maximum number of vendors, so that's actually moved from further down in that section. It was, actually, I think I need to strike that. Looks like it didn't get removed. So lines 125 through 128 need to be stricken because they were moved to line 95 through
125 through
125 through 128. It's subsection X. So that was moved up forward, so they'd be aware of that because it's kind of pertinent to them making a decision as to whether they can go there or not. And then we struck on lines 102 through 104 about the parking because again it was added to that site under lines 90 through 94. And then we removed on lines 129 through 132 the hours of operation. I know that was something that was discussed. There's no noise ordinance in the city. But again, it needs to be removed or some hours need to be put in there. And then the circumstances. Because there's commercial zoning that's next to residential, there's commercial zoning that's not next to residential. But they have different standards, so you'd have to break it out. So my recommendation was just to remove it for now. In the couple years we've had these permits, we haven't received complaints about it, so it didn't seem like it was important to spend a lot of time talking about it. Lines 140 through 146 has to do with the renewal. Just making it clear that all they have to do is submit a renewal fee and updated insurance and licenses. So they know exactly what they need to do when they renew it.
That can be done online, correct?
Yes, that is correct. This last year, we weren't able to send out notices. It wasn't set up, but for 2024, we will send notices out ahead of time, let them know, and how to renew online. Lines 147 through 150. Previously, the code didn't allow you to transfer it. I'm not sure why. I think it was just to make sure that it was reviewed. But so it does allow, or maybe it did allow, I'm sorry, it's the parks that don't allow transfer. It did allow you to do it, but it wasn't clear as to the process and that a fee wasn't, so we didn't want to charge a fee, but they do need to submit the updated information because the licenses should be in their name, not in the other vendor's name, and things like that. So it's just cleaning that up as to what the expectations are. So that's all the changes. Again, we didn't put this one out for public input because it was just process improvements, trying to make it easier to understand. And again, to allow them to be nimble, we want to encourage them within the city. So trying to identify ways to make it easier, but yet still, make sure that they operate in a responsible way. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, it would just need to be that a motion to strike 125 through 128.
The public comments portion of the public hearing is now open for resolution serial number 23-07. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? You have 5 minutes to provide your comments. No one wishing to speak. The public comment portion of the public hearing is closed. Does staff have anything else to address?
No, thank you.
Now I need a motion to either approve or deny resolution serial number 23-07.
Commissioner Crafton moves to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second, Commissioner Stafford.
Is there any discussion by the commission?
Commissioner Stafford, I'd like to make a motion that we amend to strike out lines 125 through 128, since that's been restated earlier in the document.
Commissioner Crafton seconds that motion.
Can the clerk call a roll vote on that?
Commissioner Crafton?
Yes.
Commissioner Seals?
Yes.
Commissioner Sajal?
Yes.
Commissioner Stafford?
Yes.
Now we can go back to our original motion. All in favor of approving resolution serial number 23-07, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. We're moving to committee of the whole. I need a motion to enter into the committee of the whole.
Commissioner Crafton moves to move into committee of the whole.
Do I have a second?
Commissioner Stafford, second.
We have entered into the committee of the whole. Ms. Crawford, do you have any comments regarding these items?
Thank you. The first item is dealing with dog kennels. It's an ongoing conversation as to whether to allow them in the city limits, and if so, what would be the appropriate criteria, zoning districts, permit approval process, all of that kind of stuff. So in your package, beginning on page 79, we included the definitions that are in the code for kennels and catteries. Although the item says dog kennels, they are basically duplicates of each other, so they would both be addressed. The specific approval criteria is also on page 79. Again, the only additional criteria other than the normal permit criteria is that outdoor housing areas or runs or buildings have to be 50 feet away from a residentially zoned lot line. That is the only criteria that's in the code. And then next you have the district use chart that shows you where kennels and catteries are allowed currently and what the approval process is. Catteries are, kennels and catteries are grouped together.
Page
So
83.
Yeah, so page 83, they're a use permit in rural residential. They're prohibited in R1 single family. They're a conditional use in R2 residential, prohibited in residential multifamily, and they're a use permit in commercial and prohibited in industrial and public. So there's only a few places that they're allowed anyway, and all of them require a notice. You do want to keep in mind that the use permit ones are those permits that may be going away in the future, in the directions to take us, as the city attorney mentioned last time, as administrative approval or planning commission approval. So if you want to identify zoning districts, I would take it from the standpoint of a staff approval if you meet the criteria, or it comes to the planning commission, what are those criteria? And leave the use permit out of the conversation, just think of it with those two processes. So I don't have any recommendation. Oh, you also have the zoning map on page 85, just to kind of give you an idea where these zoning districts are. The beige tannish color is your rural residential, which currently requires a use permit. R2 is purple, and there are only like 4 little pockets of purple. So I'm not even sure why they were ever included in the first place, because they seem to be higher density residential instead of, you know, something different. And then obviously you have your commercial zoning district. So I guess I'm seeking some input from the planning commission. What would you like me to provide? What kind of research would you like me to do? What are your thoughts? How are you leaning? That kind of thing, and then I can try and draft something for you to discuss at the next meeting.
Commissioners have any comments?
Commissioner Crafton here. We briefly discussed only allowing it in commercial.
I think that's what we were discussing.
That's what I think that's where we're on track for. Ms. Crawford, do you remember?
I know there was a discussion about a zoning district, and that does seem to ring a bell.
And making it excluded in everything except for commercial. And again, my thought would be it would be a conditional use permit or conditional permit, meaning it would have to come to the commission to review, just because this is a very unique business style, I think. And I mean, yes, it's in general case, I think it's a commercial purpose. If you're going to do this, you should be in a commercial area. But again, we all know there's a lot of areas where commercial abuts something that it might not be good to put next to. That would be my comment on it, is I would say we should move everything to exclude except for commercial, and it should be a conditional use, not a use permit, because not all use permits at this time, as based on today's current code, might not come to the commission. There is a chance that you have the ability to approve it based on what they provide.
Now, the only thing that I would, and I understand where you're going, and initially I go there too as far as the commercial zoning district. But this, and it's kind of it feels uncomfortable being in Alaska saying we shouldn't allow dog kennels and breeding facilities and boarding facilities. And if we weren't surrounded by an unincorporated borough that's the size of the state of West Virginia, I would probably have more reservation with recommending that maybe you want to prohibit them within the city, because we're a small little urban core. And I guess my concern from an economic development standpoint is that the best use of our limited commercial real estate within the city to direct these types of uses toward? And that's geared from 2 different directions. One, they are noisy and loud. Even if they're managed, they're noisier. Is that conducive for business owners that are on adjacent lots to them? I mean, is it going to negatively impact? If you're a restaurant and you have outdoor dining, and then there's a kennel with dog runs beside you, you've got smell and noise that's going on. I mean, there could be conflicts, and is it going to impact that? Also, the city operates on sales tax. These are not your highest generators of sales tax, and your zoning district and your comprehensive plan indicate that the goal is for retail, commercial, meeting the personal needs of residents. That's what your commercial district's supposed to be for. So they kind of don't fit that either. They fit that rural residential, but what we're finding is rural residential may have initially started out more agricultural-like in the past when the city was smaller and wasn't as developed. But we're finding that it's being subdivided and turned into subdivisions that are, just under an acre lot, that kind of stuff, which creates that rub with the neighborhoods between a noisier use. So just want to introduce those thoughts for you to consider. like I said, as a planner, I typically don't recommend prohibiting outright. But again, there is a large area surrounding the city that could provide those services to even the residents in the city that wouldn't be very far away.
And I guess when I'm picturing a dog boarding business, or I'm picturing it someone doing it out of their home so that they're on site 24/7. If we regulated this to just commercial, then that would put a burden on them to hire employees 24/7 to man the operation versus residential where they're home in the evening anyway. And so I guess that would be my concern about limiting to just commercial. I think you would essentially eliminate people being able to do this as a home business. So yeah, I don't see just limiting it to commercial being very viable for people trying to operate that business. Just my thought.
The commission also has the option to split the question, as you would say. So the definition says premises for breeding, buying, selling, keeping, or boarding, whether for profit or not. So there's the pet component, and right now the code limits you to 4, which seems pretty generous, but some people would disagree, some people would agree. Some people would say it's too much, some would say it's not enough. You could identify, again, as if they're pets, you could create a scenario where up to a certain acreage, you could have this many. If you're larger lots, you could have more, kind of a scenario. You could also deal with the breeding component separate from the boarding, because boarding is oftentimes where you get the noisiness from. Not necessarily the fact that I have a dog that has a litter of pups once a year. That doesn't necessarily generate a lot of noise. They stay till they're, 6 weeks, 8 weeks old. You have a few cars drive to the house after, they reach that age, then there's no more traffic. So you can always separate it and regulate it separately instead of, right now it's all combined together, which puts the really scary, things that have negative impacts along with things that may not have as much of an impact. So there's always that option too. So, for residential areas, if you wanted to consider that.
I mean, the other thought I just came up with as well is, what if you do have 2 animals that just happen to have puppies? You have 2 dogs and they happen to have puppies. How do we handle that? I mean,
Well, it says the ones under 6 months don't count.
okay, that's what it is. So anything under 6 months. So you have basically you have until 6 months to get rid of those animals. In whatever process that might be. Okay.
And am I reading this right, that currently there's no upper limit, 5 to 100 dogs potentially, 200?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Maybe we cap it.
But there's no proportionate, like a ratio of, if you're on a 5-acre lot, you could have 10. If you're on a 15-acre lot, you could have 15. If you're on a 20-acre, you could have whatever you want. I don't know. I will tell you that we had a 40-acre parcel come in, and the neighbors in that surrounding area were just as opposed to it as some ones where they were smaller lots.
The noise carries no matter what.
Right. And it was mainly focused toward the boarding versus the breeding or even the dog grooming. That didn't cause them as much concern as that boarding, because you have indoor-outdoor runs, and then you have to take them out, even if you don't have the outdoor runs.
Commissioner Seals, and with all the subdivisions around the city, and there's open parcels close to subdivisions in the borough, residents in some of these areas could end up with a dog kennel right across city lines from them, and there's not much the city can do about that at that point. So limiting total areas in this city to just commercial, I don't think is a good idea. I like the process, and the person that is requesting the use permit or the conditional use permit has the public forum to come by and find out what the neighbors really think about the process. So we could almost leave it the way it is and do it on a case-by-case basis, which is what we're doing now. And that would give opportunity for the neighbors in the surrounding area to comment. It would also give a person, if the neighbors don't mind, a chance to make some money and the city to get some sales tax. So,
Well, if we went to a hearing, essentially, public comment, would that, all of them need to be a CU then, a conditional use at that point?
yeah.
And 2 of them are use permits right now, so we
Yeah.
need to up them all to conditional, essentially, leaving the excluded ones excluded.
That's kind of the direction I see that would be
makes sense as well.
beneficial for everybody. If the overwhelming surrounding area is not in support, we should make a decision on a case-by-case basis by hearing the public comments on both sides.
Commissioner Sajal, yeah, I agree. I think you shouldn't just have it in commercial area. The other thing is, are there anything in the code that says how big the area has to be for the number of animals?
No, that would be, if you want to keep it in the code, I would suggest that we need to look at some example. I can do some research, what other communities do, give it to you to look at, because it definitely needs vetted out, even if you want to leave it as a conditional use coming to the commission, because you don't want to have that appearance of, oh, we approved you because we liked you, we didn't approve you because we don't like you. You still need some base standards, and, you know, like I said, those ratios, the area that you need, that kind of, some minimal standards. And then the rest can be subjective. Like I said, if nobody objects and everybody's good with it, then, you know, I mean, but it's not a popularity vote. And so you don't want that appearance of you're setting it up to be, if the audience says yes, the commission approves it, the audience says no, you don't. Certainly, if they have input that is germane to the decision, you should consider that. But sometimes it's just, I don't want it. You know, without any particular reason why, even if there's appropriate safeguards in place. And then you would have to determine, do you believe those are appropriate safeguards?
Well, if you could draft us up some of those examples that we can look at our next meeting, I think we could come to a agreement on something here pretty easily.
Now, as I'm looking at this, it says premise used for breeding, buying, selling, keeping, boarding. Would that allow them to do all of those, or?
Yes. Any or all.
I guess one thing Commissioner Crafton here would say again is, would we want to set a minimum size of lot too? So again, so you're not, again, the half-acre aspect of it, or, hey, we want to say, if you're going to do this, again, if you're on a half acre, you're limited to X number of animals. If it's an acre, you know, you can do this X number of animals here as well. Again, there also is in here already some verbiage that states that if the site plan approved outside housing area has to be already separated from residential zoned lots. So I mean, again, that would already prohibit a lot of residential zoned areas, I would think, as well, as I'm reading that correctly.
You'd be surprised how many it doesn't prohibit.
Correct, I know, but also.
It depends on the shape of that
Yeah.
lot. If they're just over an acre, it's really, you
50
can
feet's not
manage
very
to
far,
fit
yeah.
that in.
Yeah.
But it does limit the smaller ones at least. I mean, so it does create a threshold, kind of forces a threshold for a size. But I can definitely get you some examples. And then I'll see what other communities do. I'll look at Alaska, but I'll also pull some in from outside Alaska, try and find a similar size type developed community, not like New York City or something, but something that's sort of similar to
Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Wasilla, something like that. Somewhere like Montana, something like that, that might be similar, one of their smaller cities. And then see how they deal with that commercial component. And then I would suggest that R2 probably should come off the table just because the way it's developed, again, we have 4 little pockets and they're all small lots anyway.
I think that would be part of the
Yeah.
conditions that you bring, or the proposals you bring forth to us.
Okay. But I can get that together for you for the next meeting.
Yeah, I want to look out for the residents in the city, but I want to make sure it's a fair and even process and that we don't limit any commercial business in the city limits of Wasilla.
I would just add that the last year we've had online tracking, and our code compliance spends over 40% of his time on dog issues. Is that a business we want to expand? You have to think about that. These are just, dogs bite, they bark, they run, they don't have leashes. I had no idea. But it's definitely an issue should be talked about right now. And as we have limited amount of commercial land available, the other thing I would suggest is this feasible? We want to make sure that people have less rules so they can be very entrepreneurial, but also respectful that the 1 acre lots are kind of going away right now in the city.
And I would contend that if you were a good business owner, it's probably not their dogs that code compliance is after.
Commissioner Crafton here, and I think again, that's why we'd like to see everything as a conditional permit. That way, at least, again, there's always, every single one that comes up is gonna require a public comment period as well. And again, the public is ultimately the one helping us decide whether it's even worth it or not at that point. I think that's the biggest piece to the puzzle is we're not saying, no, we don't want you. What we're saying is, hey, we're gonna let the public decide. Go ahead and submit it, and we'll let the public say what they have to say about it.
Commissioner Stafford, my neighbor's dog used my yard as a toilet all winter long. I'm ready to vote tonight to ban all dogs in the city limits. But since that's not reasonable, I think what we have right now is too vague and too open. I think limiting it to looking at, so much per acre or so much, I think we need a little more here to protect the residents that don't want to be impacted by a kennel. But is there maybe some way we could still allow in certain circumstances for, an entrepreneur to have a home-based business that provides them income and in the case of the one we had a while back, provides a service to people that need service dogs. So I think there could be some sort of compromise here that meets in the middle somewhere. And so if you could research a little bit, we would certainly appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I think that would just be more than fair to the residents of the city.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I don't know why you got the He was favorite. No, I know, right? I have this big.
Would you like, Mr. Chair, would you like me to move on to
That's
legislative?
where I was just going. Move on to item number 2, committee of the whole.
Okay, so item number 2, you have in your package, beginning on page 87 through 187, the landscape standard review committee's recommendations. They adopted them as a form of a resolution, as a recommendation to forward to the planning commission, and they're requesting that you adopt them, or adopt a resolution recommending that the council adopt them. So what you have tonight, I gave you a handout that basically gives you the key points that they propose changes. So pages 87 through 146, for those of you who like to follow all the strike through and underline, it gets a little busy and some of it gets confusing because, for example, the landscape guarantee was further buried into the chapter. And it's moved now toward the front. That was a recommendation that move it to the front so that everybody's aware that that's a requirement, so it's not a surprise as you come to the end. So those will show as stricken, but actually they're moved somewhere else, and the word system just doesn't track and add those notes very well. I could add notes to the side, but then your font becomes about, a little tiny and you can barely see it. So I just left it the way that it is. And then you have, again, the clean version, which would show you how that ordinance would read if the council were, if you were to recommend it and if the council adopted it that way. You can get a feel for how that, what that resolution and the regulations would look at. And I'll just briefly, just for the record and for anyone that's sitting here listening, just, there are sheets on the back too, the same handout is on the back. But the main things that they addressed is they made all the tree sizes be consistent. Doesn't matter where they are, whether they're in a landscape island, your perimeter bed, it doesn't matter. Previously, it was 10 feet or 8 feet, depending on which bed you're in. They went with 8 feet across the board, which actually is 2-inch caliper is the measurement that they use, but that equates to about an 8-foot tree. So standardization of tree sizes. Evergreen trees, it was previously 8 foot, 6 foot. Again, the recommendations go to 6 foot across the board. For shrubs, instead of 2-foot shrubs, go to 18-inch shrubs. Again, no matter where you are, they remove the requirement for perennial flowers, remove the requirement for decorative fencing within that perimeter landscape bed. Additional options were given to deal with mulch in those landscape beds instead of it just being predominantly vegetative mulch. There are significantly more options. These include evergreen ground cover, grasses, decorative grasses, and it calls out in the code because even the committee agreed. We looked at some beds. They don't like the entire gravel bed with a few shrubs stuck in it. It's just not aesthetically pleasing. It should be a mix of mediums, whether it be plants or vegetative mulch and rock mulch. So they recommended that 50% of the beds be limited to be allowed rock mulch, but it gives you the ability for drainage. You don't have as much maintenance issues, but they thought that would give a more aesthetic, more pleasing appearance aesthetically. So that was their recommendation. Instead of it just being subjective as to, or something similar, now it calls out what your maximum is. The shoreline protection area, this is that area, there's a 75-foot setback from the water's edge that the code currently says no clearing, clear cutting, that kind of stuff. There was a provision added in. I think it had some language that said except for maybe minimal areas for lake views, but what does minimal mean? So they said 5% of that area. Just put a number to it, it's easy to define, you either meet it or you don't. You exceed it, you can't do it. If you're under that, you can do it. So, and then other revisions aren't so much specific. There was some clarification of legal non-conforming uses, how the standards apply to them or don't. Raised the number of parkings, so currently the code had some, up to so many parking spaces, you had to do 5% of the parking lot area and landscaping. So instead of it being like 0 to 10, it's now 0 to 20. So again, it reduced that amount of interior landscaping that you had to do in your parking lot. They wanted, the landscape architects felt that tables were easier to use and understanding the standards, so you'll see those tables throughout here. So we deleted a lot of text, but it moved into your table. So if you're looking at the strike through and underline, you're going to say, where'd all this stuff, why'd you delete all this stuff? Well, it's deleted because it's now in a table form instead of in a text form. Some additional definitions were proposed by the committee. The landscape guarantee, although it was pretty clear about what your options were, what it had to contain, what it didn't have is the process for how you get it inspected and get that guarantee released. So that was added to it. Same with the landscape inspection. The committee wanted to make it clear that it's on you to make sure that you contact staff before the end of the growing season. You know, if you wait till October and all the leaves are off, we can't inspect it and tell if it's alive or dead or what it was or anything. So they established deadlines for you have to call for your inspection by this date, otherwise you're going to have to carry your guarantee for another year. So it just, you know, so you'll want to read over those things, but that was, they just thought it was important to make it clear as to what that expectation is, and obviously, you know, from a planning standpoint, I totally agree with that. And then there was some reorganization. Again, it was just that flow, you know, how you go through the process, again, moving the guarantee to the front, the waivers to the front, that kind of stuff. There were waivers at the front, waivers at the back. They were consolidated, moved, kept at the front. So the committee was happy with the process. They were happy with the outcome. They believed that one of their comments was not everyone will be happy. Some people will think we took away too much, and some people think it still requires too much. But they felt that it was a nice balance, that it reduced the cost savings to the developer while still improving the aesthetic appearance of the city, which helps encourage economic development. So they felt that it was a good balance and met that. So wanted to get it to you as committee of the whole. Whether you want to talk about it tonight or not, we can have another committee of the whole, or I can put it on the agenda for public hearing at the next meeting. So I'm looking for some direction as to how you want to proceed.
Well, Commissioner Seals, with 100-some pages here, I would like to take some time to read through this. So, the commissioners have any comments on whether we should bring it back to committee of the whole next meeting or bring it forward? I know I want more additional time to look at it.
I have a question for the planner then. If we brought it back to the next meeting for a committee of the whole, would that delay as we come into the summer season mess up people's plans for building for the summer? Or would that delay, would the delay have an impact?
It's already, because of the timing, going to have an impact because, you know, just as you've seen Walmart come through and the item, the conditional use that was on tonight's, they're already in the process. Some of those are already in progress. Plans of Basil Ginger is already approved, is going forward. They didn't come to the planning commission, but that was a permit that was approved. So most of the people that are planning ahead have already drawn their plans to meet the landscape code. So what we have done, we did it last time when we rewrote it in 17, is I've advised everyone that although today's code is still current, you will have to draw the landscape plan to meet it. But if these changes, these reductions are adopted, then you can submit a revised landscape plan and then you can supplement it, you know, substitute it out. Because a lot of these businesses that would be submitting from this point forward won't even be installing their landscaping till next year. Because they'll get their foundation in by the end of the year and then they'll be framing up and doing all of the interior through the winter, looking to open maybe early, you know, late winter, early spring, and then the landscaping in 2024. So they have the option to revise it. So there will be a delay. There'll be some small projects that are running faster, but they still have that option of revising their landscape plan to take advantage of the savings.
So it shouldn't create any undue hardship necessarily?
I don't think it'll be significant.
Okay.
It seemed to work last time when we did that, and we had a few that took advantage of it, and some of them that just said, nope, we're good, we already ordered the plants, we're just rolling forward.
Now in here, from what I read, or Commissioner Crafton here, they would have to adhere to the new plan, right? Anybody that's...
Once this is adopted, yes, they will have to, they will follow this new code. So if you took that clean version, that would be the code, but that's only after it's adopted by the city council.
Right. So, because I mean, there are some people here that I know that they're prepping their landscaping, and so again, they're banking on whatever's adopted, and so knowing that this could change any day for them is, I mean, it's a little frustrating knowing that.
Well, they submit under today's code. That's, again, it won't change until you go to the city.
Well, I know that. I understand that. But it's a matter of, okay, they know now it's coming to the council, and hey, this is going to change, and we could already be partway through prepping our landscaping there.
Well, just from a timing standpoint, if you put it on the agenda for adoption in June, it would still have to go for introduction for the city council and then adoption. So it would be the end of July, 1st of August before it could be approved by the city council at the soonest.
If we pushed it forward.
Yes, even if you pushed it forward next month. So, I mean, take that under consideration. And that's why I said, unfortunately, the committee needed a little extra time. They weren't able to move quite as fast as they had hoped to. So yes, there will be some people who run into that wall and then.
I had two comments on it real quick because I read through this. On page 91, 115 to 119, they discuss mulch. Have they considered or allowing the option for rubber mulch? if you don't know about it, basically mulch can be made out of shredded tires now, and it can be colored in all different variations of coloring. And the benefit to it is it doesn't deteriorate over as long of a period of time, so people can purchase it. I think it might be a little bit more expensive than your average mulch, but again, it's something you're not gonna, every couple years, you gotta add more mulch.
So that's your definition of mulch. What you'll want to do is, I'm gonna see if I can thumb to
It's 117 types of mulch include. So on line 117 of page 91, it actually states out which types of mulch, which in this case, from what I read and when I read through it, I didn't see anywhere else that it.
That's the definition.
Yeah.
So there is a standard for mulch. For ground,
Okay.
it's under ground cover. The heading is ground cover.
I
So
didn't
that's
see
what
it
I
in
wanted
there.
to try and direct you to.
Okay, gotcha.
Because I think it does incorporate that.
It does?
Yeah, I believe that it does. I think it falls under that other similar materials. And the definition is a little more vague. Oh, yes, it's on page 109 of 195, starting on line 515. Oh, well, that's one of them. Let's see. Well, I'm in the strike through and underline version. So it's on page 109, letter D, starting at 515, line 5.
Similar appearance to mulch, evergreen ground cover, low-lying perennial plants. Yeah, it's super vague. Products with a I mean, I feel like we should define what is, I mean.
Well, it also doesn't talk about lava rocks. There's landscape rocks, lava rocks. So that's why I think they intentionally went vague so that as there's new options, new opportunities, you could take advantage without having to amend the code. But certainly, if you have a proposal that you think it provides, more flexibility, their intent was to be flexible in the option choices, just to limit the rock mulch to 50%, just from an aesthetic standpoint.
Commissioner Seals, I did highway cleanup in front of Fred Meyer's and Kane's and Smashburger down to the lake this last Saturday. And my suggestion for Wasilla is to, whatever mulch you use, it needs to not be blown by the wind, because 90% of the bark mulch that was in those commercial businesses is in the ditch next to the highway, and probably beyond that. So
Which rubber mulch is one that's usually dense enough that it doesn't blow as easily, which is one of the reasons why I was thinking about it too.
we may even consider the size. I think it was a 1/2 inch.
Or larger.
Yeah, that's for the rocks. That's for the rock. So
Even the mulch itself may have to be of a certain size so that wind doesn't carry it away.
what the committee wanted to do was, they recognized that, there were 2 landscape architects on the committee. And so what they recognized, there are some business owners that like the appearance of vegetative mulch, and they're okay with the maintenance. They're okay with having to replace it every year. And so they wanted to make sure that that was an option, but that it wasn't mandatory.
Yeah.
So they could consider the wind, the cost, the maintenance. And again, they say some of their clients want to do it and some of them do not want to do it. And, yeah, so it's intended to be written that way. If you don't think it quite reads that way, then we should definitely tweak it.
Yeah, let me,
Yeah, so,
Spend a few more minutes with
Yeah.
it.
yeah,
yeah,
we've been dealing with it for
right.
well over a year.
Right.
A long time. And at the last minute, I don't want to get it done in 5 minutes.
One other comment Commissioner Crafton wanted to make, page 111, line 557. Vehicles may not overhand.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that wasn't that it was supposed to be overhang
Oh,
there.
it's overhang, thank
Okay.
you. Yeah, if you see any of those, feel free to email them to me, or if you don't have time to email them, just circle them and go through them.
Just thought I'd point out the typo. That's all I have for this one. So I guess the question is, are we bringing this back to committee of the whole next time?
Commissioner Stafford, that would be my choice. That way we have time to review and look it through and come back with more, if we have more questions to help guide the legislation.
I agree. I tried to go through it a couple times and it just put me to sleep. Sorry, it did.
And I would suggest for reading purposes, look at the clean version. pretend you're, try and put yourself in the foot of the developer or the landscape architect or the small business owner who's trying to do this, and see if, does it, even logistically make sense? Is it organized, the right way? Are there things that should be, codes are codes, and some things, if it's a little difficult, meaning it's too legalese, that's not necessarily a bad thing for a code. We can always do a user manual, that's more layman's term, especially for the ones that aren't required to hire a landscape architect. So you can certainly separate your comments out based on that too, because that's a tool that we can do. But it's easier to read that way, but then I would definitely keep that strike through and underline handy, because you're gonna wanna go through it too and make sure that something wasn't stricken that you think should still be in there. It's a little bit of tracking. As part of your, once you're ready to go to public hearing, and as part of the city council, there'll probably be more of a chart identifying some of those relocations and things like that. I think the chart pretty much calls out most of the things. I'm still trying to think of how to present it to the city council, because they don't even deal with it as much as the commission does here. So trying to make it to where they can understand how the changes are happening. Something I'm still thinking about, so I appreciate the input from that too. But sounds like 3 of the 4 want to have it as committee of the whole, so we'll put it back on committee of the whole for June. Now, if the commission decides you want to fast track it and have a second meeting in June, nothing prohibits you from schedule. It's just a timing thing.
Yeah, and I think we can decide that at our next meeting.
I was,
Advertise, it's a resolution, so as long as we have, that should give us enough time to notify that you're gonna do a public hearing, since we don't have to send out a mail notice or anything. So if you wanted to do that, you could decide if you were comfortable with it and you wanted to go ahead and expedite it, that would be your opportunity.
I realize we've been dealing with this for quite a long time. I just want to give all the commission a chance to review it. Should we decide to make little or no changes and move this forward, that gives next construction season a little jump start on planning.
Commissioner Crafton here, I was gonna ask, did we wanna come back to it in 2 weeks though? Just to give and we make that the only item on the agenda, so that that we can talk about that and only that, we're not dealing with a bunch of other stuff, because again, if we come back to it in June, we're gonna have other items on our agenda. That would give us 2 weeks to review it.
I don't know if it matters or not, but I will not be at the June 13th meeting. I'll be out of state, if it matters.
And that's when we'd be coming back to discuss this, sounds like.
Yeah. I have lots of irons in the fire. And
We all do.
I think moving it to the committee of the whole at the next meeting is our better option. That's from my personal view. The landscape committee had months, and I think we owe it to the city to look at it for more than 2 weeks.
The other benefit to that too is anyone who has a vested interest in it that works with developers, this gives them the ability and time to comment on it, to be aware of that this change is going. Because again, they may be working with the client toward next year, or, that'll be drawing up plans just for the foundation for the fall, and then with the bulk of it happening. So it does give that public comment period.
More time.
It does.
Is there any more discussion by the commission, committee of the whole?
No.
I need a motion to exit the committee of the whole.
Commissioner Stafford, I move that we exit the committee of the whole.
Commissioner Crafton seconds.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unfinished business. There is no unfinished business, so we move on to communications. Is there any communications? Comments? Is there anyone in the audience wishing to provide any comments?
I'm with that one there.
We figured that.
You want me to put my name down here too?
Yes, please, thank you.
My name is James Mack, and I've lived here since '76 in the valley. And they were talking about that 40-acre dog parcel, 40 acres that the people want to do a dog kennel. That's close to us then. And then someone else tried putting a dog kennel in, and we argued, we talked about it. And we had our whole neighborhood come around. Everybody in our neighborhood is on either 5, 10, or 9-acre lots. None of those people want dog kennels. It's almost 150 acres right there. And we're on the boundary line of the borough. And they don't want it, for sure, I know. And what's it cost to send out these mail-out notices? Is it efficient every time someone brings up dog kennels or a junkyard or anything like that? And if you have a dog kennel next to your property, like my old woman said, value your property. Is the borough going to knock our property taxes down because there's a dog kennel and no one wants to buy your property when you get ready to sell it? It's taking money from the city, too, because you get part of our tax money, right?
No.
Well, you don't? I thought you did. So we should talk to the borough then. If the borough's telling you what to do, I mean, you should get some of that money. Shouldn't you?
We thought that would be a good idea.
I think you
for a
should.
long time.
No, you know where I'm coming from? The only sales tax money you get is sales tax, right? And grants from the government. Okay, so if you put a dog kennel in, how are you gonna tax them? Is it like 2.5% now? How do you know they're gonna give you the right tax money? You're gonna have to have someone go around and, okay, you got 50 dogs here this month. Next month I have 10 or 5. You know, how
do you regulate?
are you gonna take care of that? You're gonna have someone go around and check them? There's some more money you're gonna have to do, because you probably have people taking care of Walmart and the stores and stuff like that when they come in to pay their taxes, or however they do it. And traffic in residential areas. There's gonna put a lot more cars and everybody's, someone wants to put a dog kennel across the street here. Everybody says, okay, let's do it. Your parking here isn't that good, and over there, they're not gonna have good parking for the people. I live in a 5,000 square foot building right now, upstairs in a 1,200 square foot apartment. It's a shop for myself. I used to have a trucking company. Dump truck, after I retired a regular job. I'll be 72 at the end of this month. And I don't like woke up by barking dogs. I do not like it. I'm retired. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you very much.
You know where I'm coming from?
Yes, we think we do.
And I know.
Thank you very much.
I've had dogs, stray dogs come in my yard. This was before we were a first-class city back in the 70s. And
Sorry, but
okay.
your time is up. Do we have any staff comments tonight? Deputy Administrator?
Yeah, I just have one comment, and that is this airport lease that you guys will be looking at. It is important to know there's 18 jobs that are coming to the airport that are all over 100,000 a year. That is the cheeseburgers and the parts that were purchased in Anchorage. They will now be coming. Right. Okay. So just we're starting to ask when permits come through. We are starting to ask the number of jobs it's going to create, just so we have some kind of impactability from the economic side. And so this will be the first one that we're having those conversations with.
Ms. Crawford?
No, I don't have any comments, thank you.
Commission comments?
Commissioner Sajo, no comments.
Commissioner Crafton, if you didn't watch last night's meeting, as can't remember which one of you two mentioned, the name change, the street name change coming up. There were some really good comments and feedback. I mean, I know we do get a minutes that will come along with that street name change coming down to us. I believe that's going to be on our next month's agenda. So I would really encourage you to take a few minutes to, even if you just went back and watched last night's city council meeting, there was some public comments on that specifically that I feel would be very beneficial to our knowledge on it. And again, the minutes just don't always encompass everything. Otherwise, it was a really good one. I'm kind of excited to have a public participation on that one. That's all for me.
Commissioner Stafford, I want to thank Mr. and Mrs. Mack for coming down and sharing your concerns. Public involvement is what this whole thing is all about, and we really appreciate it. And as this goes forward, I want to encourage you to stay connected, stay involved, make sure your voice is heard, and I appreciate you guys taking the time. I know it's, taking the time out to come down here can be a burden, but we appreciate you being involved in the public process. And we are listening, even if it seems sometimes like we're not. We are. So thank you to that, and thank you to the rest of my commissioners for being here.
Commissioner Seals, I'd like to second that. We appreciate you being here, and your input is valuable. All the citizens' input in the city is valuable to our decisions. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. And see you at our next meeting. At 7:25, the Planning Commission meeting is adjourned. All I wanted was one pig.
Well, I'm going to be out of state next week.
And he was going to be eaten before snow.